We're online.
All right, welcome back. We just had a little bit of technical errors right there, but that stuff happens. Anyways, back to the race. So we are talking about how fast this race is going between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy right now. I know Dave Wasserman already made the call for Ed Markey, but we do think it's a little early. We did make a little premature call there, but we immediately retracted it. So we're going to discuss where it needs to be talked about more before a final call can be made. So I'm going to leave it to the panel as we keep looking for election results.
So just one quick thing, because I saw it has to do with this. I talked about it earlier. Brockton, I think, is an important town for Kennedy because of that high African-American population. It should be a place where he's cleaning up. And I just saw a tweet, it was about from 46 minutes ago, where the Brockton election commissioner said it's going to be later than usual before results because of a lot of mail-in ballots and other issues that we're dealing with. So mail-in ballots makes me think that Brockton could be slightly more Markey than we think. And,
That doesn't help Kennedy at all.
Excuse me. Thus far, what we've seen from Boston are more of the white areas. I'm kind of curious about if Kennedy can run up the score in the minority parts of Boston, because that's what he absolutely needs from a volume standpoint to be in the game. So that's one big kind of outlying source of votes right there.
Yeah.
An interesting result coming in from Revere. Revere is at the very bottom of the North Shore. It's more working class than most Boston suburbs. Only 21.1% of residents have a college degree, and it's pretty heavily minority, only 54.5% white, low by Massachusetts standards. Decision Desk HQ has results coming in there. Kennedy only leading at 51-48. He definitely would have liked to see a bigger margin in Revere. That's around 6,200 votes in.
We also have results.
So something to note.
Arlington as well.
Go on.
1 second.
Arlington.
The eastern part of the city. There's 3 precincts in. Markey leading one of the precinct by precinct. Markey leads the first one 410-146. The precinct 3 737-147, and precinct 5 498-169. So Markey is crushing it in Arlington right now.
It's also interesting to note about the fourth.
The numbers are from Attleboro. I just got Ted Nessie's reporting numbers from Attleboro. If those have already been talked about, I apologize. But Nessie says that Kennedy is winning by a 2-1 margin in wards 4A and 4B in Attleboro, and is also strong in Dighton right now. So I think he's doing very well on the South Coast right now, which was what we expected.
We do have some news from Steve Kornacki of NBC. Tweeting this right now, heading in tomorrow when Kennedys have been on the ballot in Massachusetts primaries, and you see all the Kennedys wins and they have 0 losses. And this is an ominous tweet from Steve Kornacki. Our graphics team is updating this as we speak.
Oof.
So with that being said, it's looking incredibly dire. Meanwhile, Dave Wasserman has called Massachusetts 1 for Richard Neal. We are going to wait a little more, and we're going to see what happens there. So what needs to be solidified for Neal's win right now? What else does he need to be doing?
I don't know what else he could be doing. He's doing pretty fantastic right now, pulling Springfield by a pretty 2-1 margin, what it appears. Still holding Holyoke, I believe. Yes, by a little. Unless Morse turns it around in these small towns that haven't come in yet, he doesn't really have a chance. I think this call's pretty much on the dot.
In my opinion, think this is do we have results or?
Go ahead.
I think, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was just going to say that this might be the case. John was talking about it earlier about some sort of that Ayanna Pressley was, or I'm not sure if it was John, I can't remember who, that Ayanna Pressley was, I think it was Mark, sorry, that Ayanna Pressley was the exception rather than the norm. And I think we're kind of seeing that, especially in Massachusetts 1, because Morse is not doing incredibly, it's not incredibly close in Massachusetts 1. And New York Times has it at 60-40. And so this could be a case where it's all smoke and no fire, right?
Well, folks, we're going to make another projection. Hold on a second. We're going to make another projection, and this is the first big race of the night. Richard Neal will go on to win his primary, and we are getting confirms all along the way. This is it, folks. The incumbent curse of 2020 has finally been broken. Richard Neal has finally broken the incumbent curse and will stay in the House as the Ways and Chairs Committee head.
Ways and Means.
Ways and Means. Thank you. Ah!
Yeah, if I could to respond, I think when you're a challenger in Massachusetts, you need a very strong case. Ayanna Presley's was, I don't have a problem with Capuano, but it's a majority-minority district. It needs to be represented that way. And that's very powerful. I think for a lot of these other candidates, they're either approaching from a policy perspective, which might not be as popular in district, or they're making some sort of other representational identity politics claim, but it's just not as easy for voters to grasp. That's why I think it's going to be a tough night for the challengers tonight across the congressional races.
Yeah, and we're going to actually make another call right now. We've been getting reports around here, and we're going to call it for Stephen Lynch. Nope, I got that wrong. That's not Stephen Lynch. That's Robbie Goldstein. We're not calling that yet. It just changed. Hold that thought. We're going to keep waiting on that. Moving on. So meanwhile, in the 4th congressional race, Jesse Mermel is still closing the gap with Claus. It is quite impressive right now. So this is just going to be a long night for everybody.
We have a lot more Newton numbers now. This looks like
Go on.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 22 out of 32 precincts in Newton now on the unofficial website. Markey still leads with around a little over 60%, a little under 40%. But in the 4th district primary, Jesse Mermel with 5,500, Auchinclaw's 4,500, and Grossman down at 3,000. Huge result for Mermel out of Newton.
And a huge result for Markey, too.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a big deal because we all expected Newton to be this close race, but no, right now it's looking really good for Jesse Mermel. Now, obviously, we still have a long way to go, and we do need to take it to the factor that most of Fall River's results are not in yet. There's still a lot of mail-in voting to be happening right now, and I want to talk about how this is transpiring for Jesse Mermel. How did this all happen? And I'd like to talk to you guys about it.
She got the big endorsements.
We have this term in our chat, and we call it mermentum. It could be happening right now. Again, we do have to see. Any other results that are coming in from anybody? Wait a second. Wait a second. Kennedy. I'm sorry
Guys,
about that.
let's watch it a little bit.
Okay. So, from Stephanie Murray. From another source, Kennedy won Worcester by 4. Not the big sweep they were working for.
That's not, yeah. I agree. That is not good for Kennedy. He needed to do well in Worcester. And I just don't, I mean, I see a path. There is still a slim path that involves him keeping big margins in Springfield and basically crushing it in Boston. But even with the results we've seen out of Boston, with Markey winning South Boston, Markey winning wards in East Boston, like, I mean, if you're Kennedy right now, you're praying for a miracle to happen. You're praying for, like, all of the vote from Newton to suddenly turn pro-Kennedy. I just, I want to hold off on a call until I see like a couple more minority-centric towns, but I would really rather be Markey right now.
And we got Brockton. We got initial results from Brockton. Joe Kennedy up 65 to 35% there in Brockton.
That should be pretty good for him. I think that's. I'd hold back the brake. I'd keep the brakes on.
Hopefully, I think he needs that margin to increase, to get more. I mean,
yeah.
Well, the thing to me that looks bad Go ahead.
Go ahead, John. Go. I was going to toss to you
I was
anyway.
gonna say, the thing to me that looks bad about the way the race is panning out tonight is that we're basically seeing a broad swath of towns and cities and so forth that are going for Markey, and Kennedy basically has a few beachheads in the more urban areas. This reminds me a lot of the Scott Brown Martha Coakley race back in 2010, where what happened was Martha was basically kind of limited to just winning a few larger areas, but getting shut out just about everywhere else. And when I'm seeing that happening in Markey's case, I think that portends well, especially since thus far he's pretty consistently held on to a 20,000 vote lead for about the last hour. So unless there's some magical vote dump, whether it be from Boston or somewhere else, it seems that Markey has jumped out ahead and he hasn't really relinquished the lead anywhere. So I think that while Wasserman jumped the gun a little bit, I do think that it is more likely than not that Markey is going to win this primary, especially now that 20,000 votes is a 12-point lead.
One thing, did we talk about Somerville results yet? Because I think Somerville has fully
80%.
80%, yeah, an 80% Markey, 20% Kennedy.
Ted Nesi with the unofficial results from New Bedford. Joe Kennedy 67%, Ed Markey 32%. It's a lead of about 4,000 voters.
Yeah, 4,091 votes net for Kennedy.
Okay, I've also just made a map of the Newton precinct results for the 4th district. Hopefully you can see on my screen here. The green is Jesse Mermel and the blue is Auchincloss. So the southern strip of blue you see is the kind of Chestnut Hill wealthier areas, and then that northern patch is the working class area up in the north. And then Mermel seems to just be doing well everywhere else in the city, and seems like she's gonna all these other precincts seems like she will carry them. A lot of Newton Center and North Newton precincts that I think will keep helping Jesse Mermel.
I caught up with Jessie Mermel earlier today, and her base of support is in Brookline. I talked to her about how she felt about her support in Newton. She was really confident about it. To be honest, I didn't really buy it because Auchincloss and Grossman are city councilors there, but it looks like she was right. She's got a good amount of support. It looks like momentum has carried her up to number 1 in that city.
Logan. Green was Mermel or Auchincloss?
Green was Mermel.
Okay, makes sense. So, I'm seeing we haven't had any more results as far as I can tell from either Lawrence or Lowell. I kind of want to see those, results, because those are places where Kennedy needs to do well, and they both show. And one is Lawrence right now is 67% Kennedy, but there are barely any votes, and Lowell is 54% Markey, but there are barely any votes. So you just kind of want to see some votes from that area, from those areas.
Just a heads up, we do have another projection from DDHQ, and yes, it is going to be Stephen Lynch who wins Massachusetts State.
I thought that would be one of the last calls of the night. I think that was probably just because they didn't have any numbers there, but interesting nonetheless. I think Stephanie Murray said that Lynch will win by a significant margin, and Markey won it by a pretty good margin too. So, I don't know what that says about voters, that they're complicated.
I just want one word on that Lynch race. I think Dr. Robbie ran a great campaign, but I think it was a little too late. He didn't have a lot of name recognition. I don't think a lot of people knew Stephen Lynch had a challenger until very late in the race. So hats off to him for a great race, but I think that was somewhat inevitable based on his name recognition.
I mean, I honestly thought, I know Lynch is an entrenched incumbent, but it seemed to me that Lynch was running somewhat of an inept campaign. He wasn't from, I know a lot of people in the South Shore, in the area, and there was a lot of presence from Goldstein, but not so much from Lynch. And I really thought that was going to be a sleeper race, but Lynch pulls it off in what looks like it'll be a pretty easy fashion. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We are still waiting on some more MA04 results right now. Still a little bit of logjam as it seems, but Jesse Marmel has finally taken the lead with 8,303 votes to Jake Auchincloss's 8,155 votes. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for real this time, we're going to project Ed Markey to win the Senate. We are seeing many people already projected on Twitter and on network. So yes, Ed Markey will win the Massachusetts Senate.
I agree with this call now. I mean, I just don't see a path. I mean, all the results we see are big wins for incumbents in South Boston and East Boston, and if Kennedy wasn't going to do well there, then where else is he going to do? And it's a historic loss. I mean, I don't think any of us. I certainly didn't see it coming when he first announced his primary bid. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think that a candidate that was also even beloved among the Democratic establishment and the voters of the state, and was talked about as a possible candidate against Charlie Baker in 2022, or candidate for governor, and now there's, he's 39 years old. He has a embarrassing loss on his record, and he could still have a political future even in Massachusetts.
Recording
Not to be that guy, but I don't think this loss will hurt him too bad. Charlie Baker lost before he won. Abraham Lincoln lost God knows how many times. Yeah, he's a Kennedy. It's historic. It's very strange to be sitting here on election day in Massachusetts where a Kennedy lost. Mm-hmm. But this is not the last time we'll hear Joe Kennedy's name. I don't think he'll run against Ayanna Pressley whenever that happens. He's going to try to stay away from that. But the next opportunity is coming. You're going to be hearing from him again.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I think he will probably find a role in the Biden administration as an ambassador.
If there is one.
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to add something. A governor's council race, which we don't usually talk about, out in the 6th district, incumbent Terrence Kennedy is down 63-37 against a progressive challenger, Helena Font, with 8.2% reporting. So that's still a little bit early, but that's something that's an upset that we could be watching later on today.
Were either of them mass majority endorsed?
I'm not sure about that.
Oh.
Anyways, meanwhile, in the House Massachusetts race for the Republicans, Julie Hall is still leading right now by 1,826 votes to 1,440 votes from David Rosa. In terms of results, it seems that Julie Hall has won Newton by a ton, and I believe. Well, no, we're going to wait until Fall River is called, actually, for this one. But we have to keep the race because it still could be relatively close.
I have some state house updates, too. According to the New York Times, in the 10th Middlesex District, progressive challenger Allison Leary is actually beating the incumbent John Lawn 55-45, but that's just in Newton. Lawn is from over in Watertown, and Leary is a Newton City Councilor. So I'm predicting Lawn will take this back and be reelected, but it's impressive that Leary is ahead right now.
Do we have any results for the Norfolk sheriff race? I know that people wanted to talk about that.
See, we should. Yes, so New York Times has McDermott at 40% and Felon at 31%.
I see. Well, I guess the only real big race right now left is Massachusetts 4, but we still got a lot of time for that. So let's dive in and talk about that a little more. Jesse, where do you think the race stands right now?
Sorry, I just tuned out for a second. What are we?
That's totally fine. Massachusetts 4.
Massachusetts
4. Yes, the one with the 7 candidates.
Right. I think there's not much of an update right now. I think I'd still rather be Mermel, maybe 60% Mermel, 40% Auchincloss, but I'll just have to wait on what comes. I don't want to say anything right now.
We also have a big result in state senate as well. I'm just saying Hampton, the Hampton district. It looks like I'm not familiar with these candidates, but it has Gomez at 67 and incumbent some Welch at 34. So it's going to be a big upset as well out west.
Yeah, I have friends who are organizers out there. That district's in Springfield, and there's a real big push to get more diverse representation there. It's one of the most diverse parts of the state, but the elected officials out there are mostly still white guys, and so there was a big push behind Gomez from both a progressive policy perspective and from a diversity of representation perspective. And that's been a winning formula we've seen in a lot of Democratic primaries across the country this cycle.
And also in state senate, in the states that looks to be so far in the the Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth state senate seat Democratic primary. It looks like Paul Timilty is up 70% over his progressive challenger. Timilty is known as the one of the more conservative Senate Democrats, and I'm not sure. I can't see on the New York Times how much exactly of the vote is in, but a sign of the fact that Massachusetts loves its incumbents so far, showing throughout all of these.
I'm curious how that really started, why our state really loves its incumbents. I love to understand sort of the history behind that.
Well, as it's been explained to me, especially in the Boston area, it's one of the few areas where white politics still exists. There's still a lot of the old school Union, Irish Catholic, or even Italian Catholic. There's still a lot of those tendencies still left among the people who really vote in Boston. I think that's why the incumbents just do so well. And also, it doesn't hurt that Secretary Galvin keeps the little incumbent under the incumbent's name on the ballot. Apparently that's not done in other states. That's done here, so that certainly helps as well.
Speaking of that, I would Jake. A factor that I thought would be more important in Massachusetts 4 would be the fact that Jake Auchincloss's name is the first on the ballot. But looks like,
Oh my goodness, Jesus Christ!
Yes.
Jesse, are you talking about the update from New York Times?
Yeah, did I just miss that while I was out?
Well, someone. Yeah, we have Mermel.
Jesse Mermel has opened a 5,000 vote lead.
Yeah,
32% to 21%.
Wow.
I don't know where those votes came from, but
5,000 votes in from Brookline. Just 5. I think this might be a reporting error because I'm
not sure. She used to be on the select.
Yeah, she's very popular in Brookline. Very popular.
And she's the only one on the ballot who's from Brookline and also has a Brookline elected position under her name.
Yeah.
Yes.
The strange thing about Massachusetts politics is that incumbents are placed first on the ballot. For those who don't know, incumbents are always placed first on the ballot. So Ed Markey was first on the Senate list, and your full address is printed under your name, so you know where everyone lives. You go to your ballot, you see, Brookline, former select board member, and so that makes sense. 5,000 net votes, great for Mermel. It could help her if she bleeds in other places.
Yeah, we did not think that this would be a tight race. This would be a tight race in Brookline and Newton. But no, it's all about the momentum there. It's actually really incredible how much this candidate has really pulled out in the lead. Of course, we still have a long way to go, especially since Southern District voting has not come in yet.
6 precincts in from Cambridge, and it's just an absolute blowout by Markey. He's up 82 to 18, 2,433 votes to 539.
Well, back to Massachusetts 4 discourse for a second. With the fact that Mermel has opened up a huge lead in Brookline, not feeling bad is the wrong word, but Alan Casey really should have done better, I feel, in Brookline. And that is his home. That's his home turf. That's where the majority of his organizing has been. And to be absolutely trounced by Mermel as he has been, really not a good sign. Not a good sign for someone who was banking probably even for an upset win, banking on some good turnout in Brookline.
Absolutely.
So I would say that if Auchincloss doesn't get like very, very good margins out of Fall River and the surrounding areas, even better margins than he has right now, we could make a pretty easy call from Ramel, which is a big surprise because I think all of us thought we'd be up for a while for this race.
Well, remember,
they all have their lawyers too.
Sorry.
It's going to be a long one in the MA4. They all have their lawyers too. I would not be surprised if this one's decided in a courthouse somewhere.
Well, the issue is that many of the South District towns have not come in yet. Even Fall River hasn't really reported in all of its ballots yet, so we're still waiting on that.
And the 4th District as well, it looks like Ben Siegel has finally overtaken Xanatos and Cavell, the two candidates who have dropped out. And meanwhile, also out of Newton, we have a few more precincts. It's just continuing the existing results, but it's looking like Becky Grossman, despite being a Newton City Councilor, will not win a single precinct out of Newton. So I think at this point, she's out of the contention to win here.
If I could say a word about Councilor Grossman as somebody who lives in Newton and has been around the council, I think something that's been very interesting for me is how she's portrayed herself when she runs as a city councilor and how she's run for Congress. When she runs her city council, she just puts out a resume, Harvard Law School, assistant DA, and she has the last name of Grossman, which was former treasurer, which is very similar to Joe Kennedy's resume. But when she ran for Congress, she's not mentioned any of that. She's talked about being a mom almost exclusively. And I think I think a lot of people in Newton are confused by that. They're confused by what like, a lot of people who may have voted for her in the past are just don't really understand the messaging, because she's running for a seat where she has almost all the same credentials as the previous occupant of the seat, but she's trying to do some weird populist, I'm a mom, and more of an emotional appeal. So I think to me, it didn't come as a surprise that the Newton voters were confused by that and went elsewhere.
It also should be noted that there are not any returns left, not any returns from Needham, Wellesley, many of the suburban areas that are near Newton and Brookline. So we still have to wait on that as well.
That is interesting. I mean, you could. I know, Adam, you've been talking a lot. I mean, you got town pride, I guess.
Well,
that Needham is a well-engaged voter base that could deliver a lot of votes, and it seems like that was a highly contested battleground in the primary. And so, I agree with you. I'd like to see how. I mean, Mermel. I would think Mermel would be favored there just based on surrounding results, but I would still like to see how she does.
And just a little bit of an
Absolutely.
artifact here. The town of Tolland out in western Mass on the Connecticut border, the only town in the whole state that gave Donald Trump more than 60% in 2016, it has reported Joe Kennedy III has won it 39 votes to 31.
This is one of those towns probably where there would be one of the few towns in the Commonwealth where there would be a bigger, probably Republican primary vote, though, correct?
absolutely.
And also, going back to Newton for a second, it's looking like that Markey will carry every single precinct in Newton, despite the fact that Kennedy's address on the ballot was he lives in Newton. It says on the ballot that he lives in Newton, but Markey is winning all the precincts now. There's only 3 more left to report, and if this continues, I mean, it's really going to show that Markey, it's more. Markey's really doing well here in the suburbs.
you can't really spin that as anything else but a complete failure by Kennedy. I mean, to lose every single precinct in Newton in your hometown is truly just, that's, I mean, for a candidate with you just can't do that. And I mean, that's, I'm shocked. I mean, I am actually not shocked. Some anecdotal, I live in Newton. I've seen a huge groundswell of enthusiasm for Ed Markey, unlike anything I've seen before. So I'm not like surprised, but this still should not have happened. And
what also could be happening, what happened, I think, in Newton was that there were so many educated voters there, as John would say. These are voters that Kennedy could not really reach out to. He instead choose to focus on low education voters. And I think if he had let him go after them, then he would have had a more competitive race on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of there's this threshold of the folks in Newton were very discerning, and even though they may have been happy with Kennedy's service in the Congress, that doesn't mean they were necessarily going to automatically vote for him in the Senate race, because it wasn't like Markey was this awful incumbent to begin with, particularly not after he started. Another thing Markey did, of the several things he did, which I thought was smart, of course, AOC was one, the chair in the hall and the other. There was also on the Markey website, when he was showing all that he did for every town in Massachusetts, I think that goes back to what you were talking about regarding, the fact that there is kind of an aspect of politics here where Massachusetts has been getting some really good benefits from the federal government. The big dig to me is kind of example A of, hey, Markey has delivered for the state over and over again, and here's what he did for each town. So it's kind of driving home in a very granular level that, hey, look at what I've done for Massachusetts, which ironically was the original Kennedy slogan when he first ran decades ago, was, quote unquote, he can do more for Massachusetts. Well, that's what Markey has been doing, and I think that was the kind of thing that won over the voters in Newton and other places.
I think something will. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think something we're going to be talking about in the coming days about Markey's win is his youth support and him. This digital team that has really turned him around. One of my close friends actually coded that map, so yeah, I think that was pretty big, and he had it on the back of his truck, a link to it, and it really pushed back against Kennedy's claim of, as you said, he can do more for Massachusetts, he's going to show up. Well, that map showed that Markey has shown up, and if you looked at my town and looked at other towns, it says he pulled in millions of dollars for our library or something. It's really impressive. It was a great idea, and I think the lesson for campaigns is that you should bring in some more young blood as your staffers instead of getting a 40-year-old man to do digital.
And I think what was really crucial for Markey was being able to unite both of the online Warren and online Bernie coalitions, in the sense that he was able to attract both voters that are highly ideological, highly policy-driven, as the Warren voters were, and the Bernie voters, the idealists, the people who get enthusiastic about things like Medicare for all and the Green New Deal, young voters who are looking for, they perceive it as voting for their future. And so he was able to unite both of those Warren and Bernie coalitions, and that pretty much sealed the deal among young liberals.
I think one thing that you have to mention, though, is that campaigns were kind of shut down for 6 months. Kennedy is unbelievable in retail politics situations. I have no doubt if Joe Kennedy had 6 months in retail politics situations, getting to go into every crevice and every tiny hole in this state, and every diner and every restaurant and every grocery store and who knows what else people are selling these days, it would have been a completely different race. It's hard to run, and the digital is run so perfectly by Ed Markey that Joe Kennedy didn't really have. He had for 6 months. And during the pandemic, it's still going on, the pandemic, but the campaign really shifted in August. But he did some town halls, but it wasn't the same momentum that Markey had. So then in August, he basically hired campaign in August. In that last month, campaigning was kind of allowed. So that's when Kennedy had to kind of fit in all his trips everywhere. He did 27 hours straight or whatever. But I think if he had 6 months to really go across the state, I think it would be a completely different story.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I've noticed in the results of Massachusetts 4 is, and I think this is actually quite interesting, Becky Grossman and Jake Auchincloss are eating into each other's leads in the South. The results from Norton just came in via Ted Nesi, and it showed Auchincloss with about 600. Let me see if I can find it. Auchincloss with around 700 votes, and Becky Grossman with 500 votes. That's not far off from each other. Yeah, it's a 200 vote difference, but I think what could happen is that these two could eat away at each other. But it seems to me that could be a problem for Jake Auchincloss. He needs the entirety of the South Coast and the South District to come out for him, but it's getting almost evenly split with Becky Grossman.
This is kind of ironic. The lack of ranked choice voting benefited Auchincloss, and now it's kind of it might be the killer for him at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
I think it. Yeah, go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, we said at the beginning of the stream that, one of the paths to victory in that district might be, going down into the southern part of the district and into the more working class areas and trying to, clean up there. The problem is that when none of the candidates are from there and none of the candidates have great, name recognition or really established support down there, that's hard to pull off. Like, in theory, if Auchincloss or anyone else could have, cleaned up in those towns, then you'd have a pretty clear lead. But in practice, when you've got a bunch of candidates who aren't very well known, you're going to see more vote splitting, and it's hard to build a solid base down there.
Yeah, but it's interesting due to the fact that no one has split votes with Mermel, especially in the place where we all thought that she would be splitting. And I think, as ironic as it sounds, she benefited from the North. And we might have been looking in the wrong direction at the entire time.
I'm hesitant. I was hesitant to make this comparison before, but it actually might make sense to Lori Trahan with their hometown advantage
really
in Lowell, because it really does seem like Jessie Mermel's hometown advantage in Brookline has propelled her because she didn't split votes there.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yeah. You have to wonder if there might be some Markey coattails playing a role in the congressional primary as well. With that race being so much higher profile and really turning out the progressive vote, but the kind of establishment-friendly progressive vote. Like Mermel is the clearest fit for the Markey supporters in that part of the district.
So I'm seeing another state house primary result out of the 10th Plymouth district, which is around East Brockton. John Lally is currently ahead of incumbent Michelle Dubois, 53-47, which would be a significant upset. I read a little bit about Lally, but it sounds like he just has almost like Kennedy style, not really that ideological focused, and more of like a leadership theme to his campaign.
Absolutely. No, any more results
Can
right
I jump
now?
in with the state house result?
Sure, of course.
I'm going to jump into the state house result. Out of Lawrence and Andover, my friend, who's the field director for the Dr. Marianella Rivera campaign, who's the primary challenger to Representative Frank Moran, he told me that, unfortunately, from his perspective, they did lose 3,061 votes to 1,415. So that's about 2-1. Rivera is, I believe, a member of the school board in the city of Lawrence. She did not win the city, but she did win Andover, which is the highly educated, wealthier neighbor to Lawrence.
Indeed.
What I'm seeing as well in the 4th Middlesex district, I haven't read anything about this, but it appears a primary challenger is beating an incumbent 72% to 28%.
Who would that be?
Cahill is the last name of the primary challenger, and Greg Guire is the last name of the incumbent.
Danielle Gregoire, I think.
Yeah. Well, in about 5 minutes, we might see another vote dump, hopefully from the southern part of the district, or for that matter, just a whole bunch of the northern part. We haven't even gotten results from Sharon or Wellesley yet. That's pretty amazing since they have a good turnout section in these primaries, even in non-competitive ones.
And hopefully we'll start getting to see some results from Boston, aside from these kind of precinct reports here and there. Neither WBUR nor Decision Desk actually reporting anything from Boston at the moment, so curious to see how that shakes out.
Do we have any calls from the Republican side? Are we comfortable to do any of that yet?
Well, the candidate for Senate was called. Yeah, I would say no. I'd say we wait until Fall River comes in a little more. If Rosa doesn't perform, he needs to perform as well as he does there. Then I think we can call it for Julie Hall. But if it's tied up, then we'll have to spend some more time here.
If I may change the subject for 1 second.
Sure.
To you, actually, our fabulous head reporter, Adam Bass. I mean, you passed 1,000 followers today, so I think we should give you a round of applause for that. For your great coverage.
Thank you. And
primaries.
And thank you very much. And as I promised, I will have to do the Ed Markey challenge on Twitter. As I confided with you, I will do it. And you know what? It's appropriate, too. Ed Markey won his primary tonight. I think that's a good little present he deserves. Again, I have nothing wrong with either Markey or Kennedy, but, the press has to keep its promise, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll have to keep working on my accent and find a desk.
I got an interesting number out of Topsfield where Moulton appears to have he won a plurality, but not the majority. The combined vote of the people of his primary challengers is 51%, while he's only polling 48%. So that's a little sore point for him tonight, but he'll win in a dominating fashion with 77% of the vote, maybe even more.
It's amazing how the vitriol for Seth Moulton has sort of faded away. I remember when he was one of the very first people to oppose Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker after 2018, and then he ran for president. And it's just sort of interesting that sort of national vitriol for him just sort of faded away.
I mean, has anything else notable happened since then?
He appeared in the DNC.
I don't mean involving him. I mean, just in the world in general. Has anything else happened since then?
Oh,
that's a very good point. Yes, sir.
That's a
I
very
have
good
zero
point.
idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, we report news, but I think we're going to dedicate to just election results tonight, everybody. Yeah, we're almost reaching the 10 o'clock mark. Thank you for joining us, but we are going to still keep going. Originally, we planned it to be at 10 o'clock, but I think we still got some time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we're going to keep keeping our eyes out for this race because, all things considered, this is going to sound weird, but I think this was a kind of quote unquote boring primary. All the incumbents won. All the expected people won. So it's the same old in Massachusetts.
And another fascinating result out of Wenham, town in the North Shore. Again, one of these Romney-Clinton, one of the biggest swings to Democrats in 2016, voted for Romney by 8.7 points, voted for Clinton by 24. It goes tonight for Ed Markey, 65 to 35.
Interesting. And we got a result out of Lowell in a state rep race. David Nangle, incumbent, has lost to former Nikki Tsongas aide Vanna Howard. Nangle had a slight problem because he's under federal indictment for using campaign funds to sustain his gambling habits. Yeah, that's pretty much expected at this point.
Absolutely. We do have Mel is now up by 4,000 votes. I think Jake Auchincloss has a little bit of a lead, but let's see where that lead came from. It comes from Easton. Okay. Easton, with him, 1,041 votes for Auchincloss, but Becky Grossman with 600 votes, 641 votes. So as I said, what's happening in
Mermel,
the
you
4th
mean?
district
Mermel, you
might.
mean?
Is it
You mean
Mermel?
I think Mermel 642, unless Grossman's pulling.
It's Mermel. Okay.
Okay, got it. And Mermel's Mermel's election night party is starting soon. I'll watch that while staying on this, and I'll bring you any updates if she says anything about the results.
Absolutely. Though I do think that we are still in for a very long night.
Yeah, as Ted Nacey just tweeted out, forget the small towns. We haven't really heard from the Bristol County cities yet. No results from Taunton or Attleboro yet, and only 15% of precincts counted in Fall River. So the big people, big shots are also prepared for a long night, so I assume we should be too.
Absolutely.
I'm interested to see why Wellesley and Needham haven't reported yet, those suburban areas.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I called them this afternoon and to see what the results is, and they said we don't really know right now. We're taking our time with this, which kind of shocks me because I think that I at least thought that Needham and its surrounding suburbs would be relatively quick in terms of reporting and voting, but they're not. They're taking their sweet time.
As more results come in the Senate primary, I know we've already called it for Markey, but as John has said multiple times throughout the night, it's this concern of when Joe Kennedy has been winning areas, he's been winning just by a little bit. But when Ed Markey has been winning areas, he's been winning by pretty massive margins. And that's kind of a recipe. That's a recipe for success. I mean, if this isn't an electoral college race, so that kind of I'm interested to see who wins more towns numerically by the end of the night. I would assume it's Markey, but we might be a little closer. But it just seems like Markey's cleaning up where he needs to be, and Kennedy can't get that same level of support.
And one area that I've been watching very closely here is southwestern Massachusetts, the extreme southwestern part of the state. Again, the Berkshires, rural but secular and educated. Markey is just sweeping these towns: Egremont, Great Barrington, Monterey, New Marlborough, Sheffield, Mount Washington, Tyringham, Stockbridge, all go to Markey, and none of them particularly close. Markey over the 60% mark in all those towns. So Joe Kennedy was just unable to penetrate the Berkshires and really make a case that Ed Markey deserved to be fired there. They didn't buy it.
And really about the only place where I'm seeing any kind of Kennedy dominance, other than, of course, your scattered cities like your Springfields and Fall Rivers, there's a cluster of towns around Worcester where just about every single one of them is going for Kennedy. But other than that, I mean, I noticed that Markey even carried Quincy, and the South Shore is kind of splitting between the two. So, Worcester's about the only place I'm seeing that kind of dominance by Kennedy, and so that's his problem, is he never really had a base. Or one that was large enough to where he could overcome whatever Markey was going to get north of Boston.
Right, and Kennedy's core base of supporters online representative of the actual people that Kennedy wanted voting for him. In this race, the marginal voter was a Kennedy supporter, for sure, but a soft Kennedy supporter. Yeah. There are simply not that many people in this state that felt as strongly about the primary as we did here on Twitter. And Kennedy's job, in order to win, he needed to get those soft Kennedy voters to turn out. And it just doesn't look like he accomplished that tonight. Right.
Because the crux of Kennedy's problem was when you looked at the support, depending on if the person was a registered Democrat versus an unaffiliated voter, Markey did the best amongst Democratic voters. Kennedy did the best amongst unaffiliated. So my attitude about that is I always think of unaffiliated voters as those who have to do a lot of pushing and pulling to get to the polls. And in other words, that's not the voter group you want to have a lead in. You want to do better amongst the core Democrats.
And that is also just a sign of, the shifting symbols of the shifting ideologies of the Massachusetts Democrats in general. I mean, the Massachusetts Democratic Party is definitely shifting left. And, I mean, of course, we like our incumbents, but also there were a decent amount of progressive upsets, even in the state house level in 2018. I remember Byron Rushing, longtime incumbent for the South End, lost to a progressive challenger. A couple other state house candidates lost to a progressive challenger, and it's just a sign that the core Democratic voting group is as liberal as it's ever been in the state.
I think there's some truth to that, but I wouldn't look too much into this Markey Kennedy race for ideological divides because it's everywhere. The core supporters for Markey versus Kennedy, Markey was further. But when you talk about the majority of the voters who are not the diehards on either side, it's the widest spectrum. I'd use the first district as an example. The 4 different permutations for voters there, they all happened. The Neal Kennedy supporters, the Neal Markey supporters, and then Morse Kennedy and Morse Markey, those all happened. It's all a mess. Nobody knows what the ideological differences were in the Senate race because there weren't very many. And that's something Kennedy made a big deal of from the beginning, is he wasn't running because of an ideological difference. So I'm hesitant to look too much into the ideological perspective of the Senate race.
Fair enough.
Well, there was another split I found, too, in addition to party affiliation, and that was the age range of the respondent. And I think what that kind of, to me, suggests is those who were around and in the voting stream back when Teddy was in the Senate, those are the ones where Kennedy did better. But as time went on, and of course it's been a decade since Teddy's been in the Senate, you have a whole new group of people entering the voting stream to where they're thinking, okay, now what's the big deal about this Kennedy guy? In other words, they may be comfortable voting for him in a House race for re-election, but in a race against the incumbent, I just think it's kind of like the Kennedy name is starting to fade a little bit relative to what it was a generation ago. And it was borne out by the response patterns by age group, where Markey did the best amongst the younger voters and Kennedy did the best amongst the oldest voters.
So anecdotally, my high school, I actually went to Joe Kennedy's high school, and you would see a lot of support among actually teachers for Joe Kennedy and older folks in the school for Kennedy. I remember distinctly a teacher actually spoke at a class meeting almost in favor of Joe Kennedy, and they actually emailed our school and emailed teachers to try to get students to volunteer for the campaign. But among the student voter base, I just saw overwhelming leads for Markey. And it was just a sign that even in a school where the Kennedy name might have some sort of impact, it didn't.
A little bit of a fun result out of Wrentham. That's, for Massachusetts political junkies would know, that's Scott Brown's hometown on the south coast on the Rhode Island border. Joe Kennedy has narrowly won it, 51.2 to 48.7, around 2,300 votes cast there.
Wrentham is highly educated, if I remember correctly, right? So, I mean, this is a kind of, that's a funky result. I mean, it's a highly educated town. It was previously quite Republican before it shifted quite to the left over the past couple of years.
It is part of Kennedy's district.
Yeah. Okay, that would make more sense then.
Yeah. And it was yet another example of where the Senate turnout was almost exactly equal to the presidential turnout several months ago. So as you're talking easily about a 1.4 to 1.5 million vote Democratic electorate when all the votes are counted.
Couple more Boston suburbs coming in north of Boston, the I-93 corridor, Melrose, all of the precincts in 67% to 33% victory for Markey, obviously Melrose bordering Malden, Markey's hometown, and Stoneham bordering Melrose, 59 to 41% Kennedy victory. He did what he needed to do in the suburbs. Hasn't lost a single Boston suburb, unless you count Medway as a suburb, and that's pretty far stretch. So, just an incredible performance from Markey in the suburbs.
Also, Markey's.
I remember the OS.
And
Sorry,
Nantucket as well. I think that was quite a surprise.
What did you say, Logan?
Markey winning the Vineyard and Nantucket is quite a surprise.
Results came.
He won the Vineyard.
Jeez.
He won. Yeah, he won the Vineyard. Yeah, because
Wow.
he won West Tisbury. He won Edgartown. Boston Globe is reporting Tisbury is in by 774 votes. I know Decision Desk HQ reported Oak Bluffs was in, and so just chill. Mark and Aquino left to report, and obviously probably not going to be enough votes there. But
I don't know if you guys touched on this, but all of Newton just came in, remaining 8%. Helped Mermel grow her lead a little bit. She's about 4,800 votes ahead of Auchincloss at the moment. She's going to need that lead for now.
And the final results for the Senate race in Newton, according to the New York Times, are Ed Markey at 64%, Joe Kennedy at 36%, about 18,000 votes for Markey, and about 10,000 votes for Kennedy. Yeah. So, I mean, just honestly, no other word for that, but terrible performance.
And I can see on the precinct.
Yeah, that's incredible. Looking at the presidential. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wouldn't call that terrible. I think it's, Markey was poised to do well in Newton. Newton tries to portray itself as progressive, whether that's fair or not. So I'm not too surprised result there. It was an 8,000 voter difference, which seems like a lot, but for Newton's a very big city. So in some ways, that's not as big as you might have thought for a city which thinks it's progressive.
Yeah, and turnout looks like it was pretty good, almost up there with the presidential primary this year. Looking at Newton's vote in the 2020 presidential primary, the top four candidates, Biden, Sanders, Warren, and Bloomberg, combined for around 28,000 votes, a little more than 28,000. And I think, if I heard you correctly, that was 28,000 votes cast tonight.
Correct. Just one quick news. Ted Nesi reports that Joe Kennedy has officially conceded to Ed Markey. And he will be speaking at 10:30 at Watertown.
All right.
So that's an official concession. So it's about as much of an evidence point as we can make. And so,
I would say that at least in the Massachusetts Senate, the discord is finally over. I think Kennedy is going to, psychologically shake hands, because you can't do that right now. Although he would want to, But I think he will be very graceful in his defeat. He'll say, "Listen, it's been fun. Senator Markey's going to be great." And I've seen takes on Twitter saying that, because Kennedy's defeated, it's the end of the dynasty. That's not how dynasties work. They're like hydras. You chop off one head, and another one will grow. And that's going to be the thing. And that's going to be the thing over and over and over again.
We need Kennedy running against Jeff Van Drew in New Jersey. So that's a shot over there.
The party switcher.
There's a decent amount of Irish heritage in, at least in the area of Jeff Van Drew. I think could do well there, and we'll see what happens there in New Jersey. But I think you'll have to ask some of our New Jersey aficionados on that question. But right now, we are still waiting on results from Massachusetts 4.
I just
looking at a couple of. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Logan.
I just saw a tweet from J. Miles Coleman. I think he just deleted it, but he says that Kennedy is actually carrying Massachusetts' first district, because due to his strong margins in Springfield mainly. And I think we saw the first district got pulled a couple times as well, as just alone for Senate, and we were kind of talking about how we thought the first district would play out. But if Kennedy ends up carrying it and loses by 10 points statewide, I think that's really going to show how disconnected it is from the rest of the state.
And just
we do
have a couple. towns here that I'm interested that haven't reported anything yet that I'm watching pretty closely. Chelsea, which is the second least white municipality in the state, only 21% non-Hispanic white, hasn't reported any results. Be interested to see what the Kennedy margin is there. Lynn, only 36% white, is similar. Everett is more white working class than the rest of the Boston suburbs, kind of closer to Saugus and Revere than it is to Melrose and Stoneham. And of course, Ed Markey's hometown of Malden hasn't reported any results yet.
So we actually do have some reporting in Massachusetts. One from Matt Safransky. I hope I pronounced that right. Neal for Congress plunges the knife. Thanks Holyoke specifically. He has won Holyoke by 300 votes. So clearly a shot, I think, at Alex Morse in his victory speech.
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure. It still looks like a 60-40 Lynch lead, or not Lynch, Neal lead. Kind of want to see if Grossman is able to narrow the margin and maybe get it down to 60 and get it down to maybe 60-40. I doubt it's going to happen, but it could be a case of, just progressive enthusiasm in the rest of the country, not so much translating in Massachusetts. And I think that has to do with the fact that Neal did kind of fit the district. I mean, if we're looking at progressive upsets, Neal wasn't too ideologically out of step with the district like Lipinski was. He wasn't, and it wasn't like a majority, it wasn't like a Elliot Engel case where it was a majority minority district held by a white guy or a Joe Crowley sense. And it certainly wasn't, a Cory Bush case either of there being like a huge urban area to juice turnout. Mm-hmm. This is like a rural majority white district, and Neal fit everything, and so therefore was able to turn back what in theory to the internet seemed like a strong primary challenge and turn it back pretty easily.
Well, he also took it seriously, and he did, he took his primary challenge in 2018 seriously too. A lot of the time when you see an incumbent lose a primary, it's because they tried to kind of coast and were caught flat-footed. And, that was never going to be the case with Neal, like him or don't, but he definitely, has deep roots in his district, and he did what he had to do. There was progressive enthusiasm from Morse, but Neal could match it shot for shot, and that was what it took to win.
Yeah, it's a great point by Ian. I think something that people don't understand about those New York upsets which have happened, how unseriously those incumbents took the election. Joe Crowley didn't show up to one of the debates. He had a city councilor do one of the debates for him against AOC. And then Elliot Engel was in Maryland for the entirety of the pandemic. He didn't even come home. I think Massachusetts incumbents know better than that. Massachusetts incumbents will do anything to stay in power. They're not going to do stupid things like what happens elsewhere in the country, and that's why I really don't like the comparisons. I understand that there's this desire to make every race seem like it's neck and neck, and that that's the challenger and the incumbent, and it's this beautiful race that's going to come down and it's going to be intense. But you can't use the New York terminology when you're talking about Massachusetts. They're just so different. The racial component is also different. Besides Ayanna Pressley, who was in a majority-minority district, the rest of the state's congressional districts are not like that. They're just Massachusetts voters like incumbents. And until you can find a better formula where you're not trying to steal the playbook from New York, you have to create a Massachusetts style of a challenger. And that hasn't been done yet, and I don't know if it ever will be done, but it sure will not. I can assure you it's not going to be the same one as New York.
Back in Massachusetts 04, looks like Mermel has actually opened up a 7% lead, I think, because of the added Newton margins, and I think because she's staying pretty strong with Auchincloss in some of the South Coast towns, and in places like places like Medway and Medfield. So Auchincloss needs a big surge if he's going to be able to do that. With that, I'm actually going to leave everybody. Thank you. Listen,
Thanks for
the stream
joining
ad,
us.
everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna call it a night as well. It's been tons of fun, and it all started with that little innocuous poll.
It sure did. It sure
Yep.
did. Yeah.
Thank you so much, John. John is one of my mentors. I
Absolutely.
respect him a lot. Please go follow him on Twitter.
Yeah.
Win with
Thanks,
JMC.
John. You're an election Twitter legend.
Oh, thanks. Y'all have a good night.
Good
You
night.
too.
Mhm.
So right now I'm just playing around with the spreadsheet a little bit. Again, a little bit of an update on how the most educated municipalities in the state are going. Brookline, 69 to 31 for Markey. Weston, 65-35. Newton, 65-35. Cambridge, 82-18. Those are partial. Winchester, 67-33. Acton, 71-29. Markey just absolutely cleaning up among college graduates, particularly in the Boston suburbs, but really everywhere. As we saw earlier, with that Rentham result being closer than expected for a town on the South Coast because of those high education levels. Really something. There's something about seeing a trend, a demographic trend, in an even stronger fashion than the polls had indicated. It's really something to see.
Yeah. So I have a theory about how Mermel could actually win, or how Auchincloss could win in that regard, and we might be seeing it right now in voting turnout from the South. So what she needs to do is have her or Grossman eat away at Auchincloss, and then you just win big in those rich white suburbs. Your Needhams, your Wellesleys, your
Dover.
Dovers. Yep, exactly. Although I think Dover's going to go to Auchincloss. Well, maybe not. But I think that if she just does that, she can win. Like there's a good path for her. Thoughts?
Anyone?
I'll leave the exact statistical breakdown and the districting to other people. That's not really my specialty. So
We got Belmont coming in, another one, educated suburb of Boston, inner ring suburb. Just a huge vote for Markey. He wins it by 50 points. I mean, 5,948 to 2,001. That is a beatdown, folks.
Actually, guys, I think we're ready to make another call for the 4th District, but for the Republicans. I think, and if this is correct, I think Julie Hall is going to be the nominee for the Republican seat in Massachusetts 4. Excuse me for that.
yeah, one of my sources has been telling me that for a little while. He said just as long as Fall River wasn't a disaster for Hall, it looked like she was going to pull it out there. So I think that's wise to make that decision, as long as Fall River was all right.
Yep, and we're going to call it for Julie Hall. And if if Jesse Mermel wins, then for the first time in Massachusetts 4 history, one of its representatives will be a woman. So that's pretty historic.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We got a nail biter with another Kennedy, the Terrence Kennedy, member of the Governor's Council. The race is tightened. Progressive challenger Helena Fonts has a 50.5% of the vote, and he has 49.5% of the vote. So just 1% separating those two. I guess that Kennedy race could be closer. Oh, and Kennedy has just taken the lead. I don't think that anyone has said that today yet.
So look, I'm just looking through the Republican result for the Senate primary. Kevin O'Connor currently leading 59.4 to 40.6. The AP has called the race for O'Connor. Shiva has won a couple of municipalities. He's won in Agawam. He's won in the city of Gardner. He's actually won in Belmont. He's won in Athol, he's won in Rochester, he's won in Orange, and he's won in Paxton. So some bright spots for Dr.
He's from
Shiva.
Belmont.
He is from Belmont. Okay, that makes sense. He actually won it 400 votes to 325. So some consolation for Shiva supporters. He's at 41%. Certainly a respectable showing, but not enough to take the victory.
And I think for Shiva, he what he needed to do was to really get out those really excited, quote unquote, Q voters that would vote for him. But the problem is that Massachusetts doesn't really have that. I'm sure there's plenty in the state, but not as much as you may think, you know. And this could be in due part because of the high educated voters here in Massachusetts, or it could be just it's not a very, how do I put this, good testing ground, good soil ground for the quote unquote Q voter. It's not really a fertile ground for them here.
And also,
And
Shiva,
you know, I'm just reminded.
Sorry,
go ahead, Logan.
Okay. So Shiva as well. He spent a lot of money on this. He self-funded about $1 million and raised about $500,000 more and spent most of that money, while Kevin O'Connor was down around about $300,000 in money that he spent. So Shiva's really, I think this is probably the second time this has happened, but he's spent a lot of money for not a lot of results.
Yeah, high cost per vote. And, you know, I was just thinking, obviously we don't have exit polls because of the pandemic. But if we did have exit polls, I'd be really curious to see what the makeup of the electorate was in terms of what percentage of the electorate was college educated or postgraduate, what percentage of the electorate was white, et cetera, et cetera. Based on these results, I think the electorate might have been more college educated than people were originally expecting.
I believe so. Yeah, I think, and I think Markey played his card, or not Markey. Just any of the candidates played their cards right with those high educated voters. And now that actually brings a good question, because you have to wonder if that's going to affect Massachusetts 4. And you know, sort of that split between the districts. You know, does Mermel do well with highly educated votes? I would assume they do. She does well with high educated voters. Jake Auchincloss, I think, would low educated voters. So we're going to see what drives that turnout. And if I'm correct, we have not even had mail-in ballots counted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the law in Massachusetts is that you can't count them until the polls closed. And so any announcements would have had to come, you know, over the last few hours. And I haven't seen anything on Twitter about anything officially being mail-in. I mean, obviously, some of these results could be mail-in, and they just haven't been explicitly announced as such. But I'm sure so far there's 611,000 votes counted in the primary, according to Decision Desk HQ, and we know that we're aiming for around 1.2, 1.3 million total. So there's probably a good chunk of mail-ins left to count, and we'll see. I mean, I would imagine that they're going to skew towards Markey. We know that generally mail-in votes tend to skew Democratic in general elections, and then within Democratic primary elections, they tend to skew to the progressive candidate. So a great example of this happened earlier this year in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's race between George Gascon and Jackie Lacey. Jackie Lacey, the moderate incumbent, and Gascon, the progressive. Lacey was initially above that 50% runoff threshold, and then as the mail-ins trickled in, she was pushed below it, and now there's going to be a runoff. So mail-ins, I would expect to favor Markey. He currently has an 8-point lead on the DDHQ result. It could conceivably grow to 9 or 10 or maybe even more, and that would certainly be impressive given the polls that were out.
So I know some mail-ins definitely have been counted. I've seen some unofficial results that first started with just in person, and then they expanded up to mail-ins. So I think some cities have definitely counted, but I think as well, Boston is definitely the big last city that's, or I think Attleboro as well in the New York Times. That actually Boston is just coming in now, but there's still a lot of votes to come from there.
We've got 45 precincts from Boston in, and Markey leading 60-40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Markey takes Boston, as far as we know. And it's interesting that that Boston's reporting yet, and we still have nothing from Bristol County as of yet. So what do you think the effect in Boston will have on at least the Senate race? I mean, it's over now, but what do you expect from Boston?
I think Boston is focused on something else the second this ended today. Boston mayor election 2021.
That's a good point.
The unofficially it starts tomorrow. Officially it will start November 4th or in December. But that's what focus is going to be going on in Massachusetts. Maybe people will think a little bit about New Hampshire and the presidential, but from a pure Massachusetts politics perspective, that's going to be very interesting. And then you have to see what Governor Baker is going to do in 2022. If he decides not to run for re-election, which I'm hearing is a very real possibility, that's going to be one of the craziest Democratic primaries we've seen in this state. Everybody, it's going to make this MA4 primary look small. It's everybody and their grandma is going to be getting in that race. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. So I think right now it's the consultants and whoever else, they're all thinking about how to play Boston and the mayors, what's going to happen with Walsh, if he's going to run for re-election, and if not, it's going to be Michelle Wu and maybe a few other Boston city councilors or organizers who are going to be challenging for that mayor's seat. So that's starting unofficially tomorrow.
An interesting result, looking at the Norfolk County Sheriff primary, the Democratic primary there. The sheriff right there is an appointed Republican, and there are 3 Democrats in the running to challenge him in the general in November. And currently the leftmost candidate, William Phelan, I don't know how to pronounce his name, has 37%
That's
of the vote.
very unfortunate name.
Better not be Felon.
He's leading. It's Phelan. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's got 37%. Patrick McDermott is at 34.7%, so pretty close. And then James Coughlin at 28%. So again, the winner of that primary going to face the appointed Republican sheriff of Norfolk County in the general.
Mm.
Congressman Kennedy's on standby from his campaign headquarters. He's supposed to speak any minute now, so just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and the Times just called
Absolutely.
it for Markey. A few hours late, but
Yep.
a call's a call.
There's one more race left, and we're still here for it.
There's an interesting governor's
Yeah, go on.
council primary in the 7th district, which is the central part of the district. I think mostly it's McGovern's area. Democrat Paul DiPaolo, I think I'm going to personally call this. He's leading 62-38 with about 58%, and I think it's tightened a little, 60-40. I think he's pretty safe. The Baker-backed Democratic candidate, Hadriac Rafferty, looks like he'll lose, and with no Republican candidate, DiPaolo will win in November, and the governor's council will be 8-0 Democratic. And where did Adam go?
Oh, I'm here. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm just getting something. My dog is nibbling on my toes, so I need to get her out of here. You keep up the conversation, guys. You can talk about.
Joe Kennedy's at the lectern route right now, so if anybody wants to tune into that.
If anyone's listening to that, can give us some updates.
I mean, we could play it on here.
I think I can. I think I have it right now. Wait, is this,
All right.
is this a video?
Logan's gonna tune us in.
Yeah, I think so. Let me. Is this? Let me. I don't know if this.
Yep, Logan's gonna tune us in. Just a minute. Let me get changed.
I'm on the WCVB news thing, but I don't know if this is a pre-recorded video or if this is live.
I'll just go to YouTube and search Kennedy.
Less breaking news. We have a tweet from President Trump. Not very relevant, but he says, Mike Pence was never put on standby, and there were no mini strokes. This is just more fake news by CNN, a phony story.
All right. Anyways,
Oh my
going
gosh.
back to that, I am back. I'm here, and much more comfortable. Logan, have you managed to
No.
tap us into that? Oh,
Oh wait,
hold on a
I
second.
think he's live on his YouTube.
Oh,
Yes, that's a good way to
Yeah.
carry.
Here
For
we are.
Lowell and for Worcester. We built a campaign for working folks of every color and creed who carry the economic injustice of this country on their backs as tests. What about the child care bill that is due on Friday? About the paycheck? We built a campaign for those who do not have the luxury
Here we go.
of accepting the status quo or the privilege of being patient for just a few more years. That is who we fought for. And they showed up today in droves.
In the interim, I'll give an update in the 4th District. Jake Auchincloss is closing the gap
They showed
with
up for
Mermel.
a few more years.
2,400 votes separate those two, so
That is
we're
who
going to be here for a long time.
we actually have some results finally
They showed
from
up.
some northern towns. From Wellesley, Mermel has the lead with 20% of the vote there. To
They showed up
Auchincloss is
for us.
13. Mansfield, surprisingly, Mermel is leading there by 16 to Auchincloss is 15. Fall River, Jake Auchincloss
Showed
with
up
21.
for them.
With 21, and if I can get this right there. No, that's not Auchincloss. I apologize. In Mansfield, Jake Auchincloss with 22. Jesse Merle with 16. That is Grossman's totals I read. Auchincloss 25 in Fall River with 21 to Grossman. Milford, we have Auchincloss 25. Norfolk, Auchincloss there. We still have a bit more time. What was that? Well, it seems like it's looking that way. But we still have a little more time. It's getting really good for Auchincloss right now. Mermel might have hit her ceiling.
Wellesley also goes 62 to 38 for Ed Markey. Sherborne, near Wellesley, coming in at 68-32 for Markey. More blowouts in the suburbs.
I think
So it's back to Auchincloss at 82 cents at the dollar. Hmm. Yeah, I think I would be Jake Auchincloss right now. It seems to me that those southern towns are really coming through. Unless Mermel can really tighten up those margins in Needham and Wellesley, I don't know.
yeah,
Well,
he really
so-
made the South his home for this campaign.
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing: they are neck and neck right now. Auchincloss in leading by a substantial margin in Milford, 25 to 21 with Grossman in second. In Somerset, him 27% to 19% for Grossman. Medway 24 to 20. Norfolk 24 to 22. Grossman. Rentham 25 to 23. Seekonok. Becky Grossman 25 to Auchincloss is 19. Millis, Auchincloss 23, Grossman 22, Hopkinton 24, Mermel 20, Auchincloss, Norton 26, Auchincloss 20, Grossman, and that's all the results we have so far via Decision Desk.
Would just like to interject and say that with 72%, well, I know it's a flawed metric. AP says 72% precincts reporting in the first, and Neal is at 60, Morse at 40. I'd like to point out that my prediction before this was Neal 61, Morse 39, so I will just take a small victory lap for that one. Pat myself on the back. Correct prediction.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have some big breaking news from Ted Nesi. Attleboro has had unofficial results, and Grossman is in the lead there. A big blow for Jake Auchincloss. If I can find the tweet. But yeah, this was an area that Auchincloss needed to do well in, and Grossman is eating up his lead there. So right now, I believe Grossman leads Attleboro 26% to 22% Auchincloss.
I think the number that is more relevant to our conversation right now is the raw vote lead that Auchincloss carries over Mermel in these towns. He carries around, if I'm doing the math quickly here, 426 votes over Mermel in Attleboro. So he closes the lead a little bit. If my math is right, she has a 2,100 vote lead now. It's getting more precarious by the minute, and I really doubt she can hold this out if she doesn't find another hole where she can get a ton of votes.
Yep.
All right, guys. I think I'm gonna hop off, but thanks everybody for a very entertaining night.
Thanks for joining us.
All right.
And
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Best wishes for the rest of the night, and
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Alex. It was an absolute honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say goodnight as well. But thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Take care, Ian.
Night.
All right, it's almost
so
the
we are
cod cabin
still
game.
waiting on. Yeah, it's almost the cod cabin gang. Cod cabin crew, cod cabin gang. But yeah, it is just as far as we can to quote some. We might want to close up shop for this at least for 11 o'clock, and then the results on Twitter.
We'll be following those
go
through
on
the
for a couple.
night. Yes.
What?
I said
Yep.
we'll be following those through the night.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely keep you guys updated, but we are going to keep covering it for about 15 more minutes, and then we're going to see where it goes from that. If nothing comes up at 11 o'clock, we're going to call it for now, say good nights. But yeah, I think things are going up Auchincloss right now, unless I don't know where she can find those pockets, because Wellesley's not providing anything for her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure if we're going to be making any calls tonight for the 4th Congressional District.
I doubt it.
In fact, I dare say we are not going to make a call for the 4th Congressional District. We're going to have to wait until the night plays out. Actually, I think, guys, we might have to call it for tonight. It is getting pretty late here, and I'm sure.
Can I say something before we drop?
Get ready for tomorrow. Yeah, sure.
Just saying, in the 4th District race, I'm just gonna say I think Auchincloss is gonna win it. I would rather be him right now. I think he has enough votes in the South to put him over the top. Of course, it's not a projection. This is just a guess by me.
So It's a great bombshell to end on.
Yep. I think Auchincloss is the favorite for tonight. Well, regardless, thank you all for joining us on WCCS Wheaton College Radio. And thank you all for following us in Massachusetts politics. We're going to keep doing what we do best. Expect more cod cabins, expect more coverage. And this state is why we love it so much. This Commonwealth is why we love it so much. But thank you all for joining us. I'm Adam Bass. Take care and good night.